Welcome to Order Militarist Radio TV, and today we are with Brother Alexis Bonello. He is a dual citizen of the United States and Italy. Currently resides at Rome, president of the Italian nonprofit The Scholasticum, which is dedicated to reviving the scholastic method of investigation and analysis. A Franciscan hermit who observes the rule of St. Francis by private vows with tacit permission of Pope Benedict XVI and written permission of the Congregation for Religious in 2006. Currently also president of the U.S. corporation Order Militaris Inc., which is dedicated to helping persecuted Christians, former member of the Franciscan Friars of the Immaculate, graduate of the University of Florida at Gainesville, 1986, BA in Cultural Anthropology with emphasis in classical studies, Phi Beta Kappa, Our Lady of Grace Seminary, Boston cum laude, former student of the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, the Pontifical University of Santa Croce, and the Pontifical Faculty of St. Bonaventure, translator of the critical edition of the writings of St. Francis of Assisi and Bonaventure's Commentaria in Quater Liberos Centiorum Petri Lombardi, the first of which tomes of Bonaventure's commentaries is in print and available at Franciscan-Archive.org, internationally in the San Paolo bookstore on the Via Concilione here at Rome, author of 30 Principles for a Scientific Study of Scripture, the historical narrative of the Book of Tobias, and the Ecclesiastical Latin Grammar Volume 1 textbook and video course. Also a graduate of Satellite High School, Satellite Beach, Florida, class of 1982. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be on Order Militaris Radio TV, the apostolate you do personally for our order, the Order Militaris Catholicus, as honorary knight in our order and co-founder of the Wyoming, now the Montana Corporation. You're born and raised in Kansas. You were in ROTC. You've been to community college when you came down with some serious health problems, which has confined you to your home for the last number of years, but physical descendant of Charlemagne, and you're related to all the nobility of Europe, and with the spirit and zeal of all your ancestors, warriors, and saints. So it's always an honor for me to be on today with you whenever we do a program, but especially today when we speak about the Crusader Option.
The police last night, or a few nights ago in Minneapolis, released a statement to the citizens there. Do not resist the bad guys. If they come for your property, give it to them. Will this violence ever end?
It's shocking, and I think almost unbelievable to us who are American citizens born and raised in the United States to see this kind of lawlessness throughout the United States, but even more so unopposed by the authorities. This is the kind of things you see in the third world. We never thought we'd have it. In the United States, we have a modern system of government, a modern system of police forcing, a not light tax structure, so people pay their taxes, they should get defense, especially property owners. And to see this level of mayhem go on with the approval of corporate America, the mainstream media, and the do-nothingness of so many governors, mayors, heads of police departments, and even Washington, D.C., is just unbelievable. It's going on. People thought it would stop, but it seems that the establishment wants to make this a permanent part of American society, constant riots and mayhem, and they want the general populace to submit to the rioters. And if this was just a riot over, for example, the death of George Floyd, that's how it began. But it turns out now that the guy died of an overdose. Even in the video shows that he's in the process of dying before he's even arrested.
Mm.
It would be understandable, but no, it's clearly ideologically backed, internationally organized, politically motivated, and it has a precise and malign goal, and that is Marxist revolution, a complete takeover of society. And people ask themselves, well, why isn't anyone doing about it? Or why, if anything's done about it, it's always uncoordinated. Okay. This is part of the Rockefeller 2010 plan, and part of which is called Lockstep, the creation of a fake pandemic, complete shutdown of society, and the incitement of violent reaction by the population. They didn't get the violent reaction from the population, so they instigated it through their own globalist organizations. Black Lives Matter is founded by George Soros, who's a member of the Bilderbergers, and Rockefeller's founded the Bilderbergers. So what they want is to justify the complete enslavement of mankind. And they have collusion with the highest authorities in the Catholic Church, who have deprived us of church, of the sacraments, and even attempted to mutilate our religion to make us believe more in a pandemic that doesn't exist and fear more a winter flu than we believe in Jesus Christ, who is our God, our Savior, and rose from the dead, and can heal anyone of anything with his touch, not only when he walked earth, but even in the most blessed sacrament. They don't seem to believe that anymore. So people are rightfully fear for their lives and for the loss of their property and for the murder of their own families, because who's going to protect them? If you live in a town where there's only like 3 policemen for every 1,000 population, or even 12, how are they going to defend you when mayhem strikes? There's not enough of them. The government isn't calling out the National Guard and the militia in mass to do anything about it. And even the U.S. Army is not but 300,000 men. They couldn't possibly prevent this kind of thing in every city of the country. It's just not strong enough, even if you added the National Guard to them, even if there was a will. But it doesn't seem that there's a will to stop it. I mean, even when the current government is transferring money from World Health Organization to Bill Gates Institutes, and Bill Gates is insisting that everyone has to be vaccinated, and all the best medical professions are saying this vaccine will kill you or sterilize you or so ruin your health as to make you dependent forever on the vaccine industry. I think people have to realize that now is the time they have to take serious and decisive action to protect themselves. And I think Catholics who see that are sane. As a head of a private military corporation that's dedicated to security and defense, I have to say I agree with them. I think that is a sane, rational response. The institutions have shown us they don't care for us, they don't trust us, and they have malign intent against us. So out of self-defense, we must react, and our decisions must be decisive, because when barbarians have entered the gates, or invaders are in the process of conquering the country, if you don't make a decisive decision, you will perish in the onslaught.
There's a good short little video about 9 minutes long by Anthony P. Stein out of Oklahoma. The solution for our times, the Crusader Option, which he promote, which he actually started.
It was an essay I wrote in response to what's going on.
And there was quite a few comments, some good, some way out there, just to be charitable. Like this one from a Polish commenter. Will this option only be for men, like what a Polish group does here?
Okay, so in response to what's going on in America, I wrote an essay where I wanted to upgrade a concept promoted by Rod Dreher, who was Catholic and became Orthodox, and in 2013 wrote an essay called The Benedict Option, where he, reflecting on the strife and conflict in Western civilization, suggested that Catholics do what many Catholics had already begun to do, is move out of cities into the countryside, around monasteries, and live their life in a way that was kind of recalling Chesterton's call to go back to the countryside, live a rural life, and thus avoid the cultural conflict and be able to live their life, Catholic lives, more peacefully and more securely. So taking that as kind of like a suggestion, I suggested that now, with what's going on in the world, with the fake pandemic, the riots throughout the United States, and the open attacks on the Catholic faith, and the persecution even by our own clergy by the denying us the sacraments, that we have to do is respond in a more coordinated fashion, a more decisive fashion, and a more independent fashion. And I call this the Crusader Option. Perhaps calling it the Crusader Option is a word that people will not understand, because they don't understand what the Crusades are. The Crusades are when Catholics take the initiative to defend civilization. It has nothing to do with racism or wanting to conquer the world, okay? It's strictly defensive. So you could change the word Crusader with Catholic Defensive Option, okay? So what does it consist in? It consists in Catholics founding institutions in society that are completely imbued by the faith and do not participate in the control networks or ideologic narrative of the globalists, the Freemasons, the Marxists, the modernists, or any part of the progressive left, okay? And therefore they should go out and found their own schools, their own companies, their own banks, their own social institutions, and even their own communities and their own security companies. Obviously, I would advocate that as the head of a Catholic security company. But where will they do all these things? And under the threat we are now, where could they do it where all these things wouldn't themselves be persecuted? All these things together need to work together, like 5 fingers in a hand form a fist, to defend themselves, okay? And as a security company dedicated to the defense of Christians, I am very sensitive to the threats against Christians anywhere, and especially this threat. And so I wrote this essay called The Crusader Option, which suggested that all these things be done in a new community founded in the countryside, which is completely controlled by Catholics, and is dedicated to their freedom and their liberty under the aegis of a security company like our own, which would provide them with armed security so that they don't have to face the conflict that's coming or that is currently existing on their own. They can do it together.
Well, for that Polish commenter, will it just be for men or everybody, all Catholics?
So obviously it's for all Catholics, okay? Families, retirees, workers, students, all Catholics, the entire Catholic population. I have a degree in cultural anthropology, so I look at the whole thing. The whole thing has to be saved. The whole Catholic population, the whole Catholic society, the whole Catholic culture, the whole thing needs to be saved. So we need a community that sets all. That's why the Benedict option doesn't really apply anymore, because the Benedict option is where Catholic families gather around monasteries. Well, that's good for your spiritual life, but it doesn't help you economically, politically, it doesn't help your education. That's not, a monastery is not the whole of Catholic society. I myself am a Franciscan, and I'll tell you that, okay? The monastery is built to help us, religious, help you, but it's not built directly to help you, okay? So it's only part of the society. That's why the Benedict option is already outdated. You need to upgrade your Benedict option. So it has to be for families, has to be for everyone, men, women, children, okay? It has to be for everyone, because in charity, we have to want to save everyone. And it has to be for everyone, however, who wants to partake of it.
Next commenter asked, will these businesses be open on Sundays and holidays? Certain ones have to be opening. get your meats or whatever, then shut down, or will all businesses be shut?
Okay, so the general Catholic teaching is what you would expect to be implemented. Okay, so general Catholic teaching is that we should honor the Lord's Day and not violate it with servile labor. Servile labor is any work that you'd pay someone to do. Okay, especially physical exercise. But Catholic teaching has always allowed certain things to be open on Sundays, like places that sell coffee, places that sell gasoline, train stations, things involved in transport, because even on the Lord's Day, some people have to travel somewhere, or some things might happen. If your car breaks down, you know, you need someone to tow your car to a mechanic. So the concept of no work on Sundays was never an absolute like it was in the Old Testament. It's relative, so that you can attend. So obviously, I think a Catholic community that is founded to fulfill the Crusader option should have its own churches, and therefore enable people to observe Sunday. And they should put in practice all the other things. There's no reason for certain stores to be open on Sundays. There are exceptions of, for example, like a jewelry store that sells wedding rings. That old Catholic manual said, well, since most Catholics come into town on Sundays and they have to buy their engagement rings, the men guy dues for the girl that they're going to propose to, those stores are allowed to be open on Sunday. So there's always a certain, you know, it's not quite the Protestant blue laws, the Catholic teaching, but this is an unusual question because cities are burning down, people are being, churches are being torched, statues are being destroyed. You were just imprisoned, or maybe are still imprisoned in your house by a police state for a disease that isn't dangerous to hardly anyone. And the person's asking if blue laws are going to be installed. I mean, it's like we need to open our eyes and not look at these little minuscule details that are somewhat pharisaical, not entirely, because our Lord's Day should be observed, and look at the absolute existential threat through all of Western civilization being done by the globalists. That's the problem. It's not blue laws. So I found it remarkable that someone should even make that comment at this point in history. We have to have a wider view. We have to see the reality around us. We can't fixate on minor details, although this is an important detail, but it's not the main problem right now.
This comment from DC. Our Lady said to pray the rosary every day. I think that's our solution. If everyone does this and prays for the consecration of Russia, we'll see things improve when the bishops do as she says.
Okay, so this is in part an excellent comment, and in part it has serious difficulty to it. So it is excellent. Our Lady promised us that with the rosary we can obtain anything, even the grace that the bishops consecrate Russia. But the rosary will not convert Russia. Only the act of consecration will convert Russia. And also, the importance of the rosary doesn't cancel out the entire Catholic religion. Our Lord Jesus Christ is king, and you can't quote Our Lady against Jesus Christ, okay? And what has Christ said? If you're persecuted in one town, flee to another. Okay, so that's scripture. That is the divine revealed word of God. Those are the words from the lips of the living God, okay? You cannot quote Our Lady's words at Fatima against that saying of Christ. And so therefore, there are things, our Lord tells us, for which no prayer is the solution. The solution is flight. And he doesn't mean spiritual flight, getting detached, although that's also implied. He means physically taking your family, selling it in your hand, and getting the hell out of there, okay? And going to a place where you're not persecuted. And Christians have always observed this law. That's why our religion is not about conquering the world like Islam. Our religion is about living for the world to come and surviving in this world. Christianity is fundamentally a religion of survival, surviving the shipwreck of original sin, surviving all the calamities of this world. No Catholic saint has ever insisted that the faithful stay and get massacred, okay? And so yes, we should say the rosary, but we would commit a serious sin of presumption if we think that if rioting's breaking in our town and we can flee, but choose not to flee, that the rosary will save us, okay? There are many Catholics who during earthquakes have fled to churches and asked God for help, and the church collapsed on them and killed them because they didn't flee to a building that wouldn't fall, and they fled to a church that could fall on them. Were they misguided? Maybe they don't understand architecture. But if you understand architecture, you know that during an earthquake, you flee to an open field. You don't flee inside a church because, you know, there's no guarantee that church won't fall down. So this is not impiety. This is just the sanity of the Christian religion, okay? We cannot fall into the error of pietism, which arose after the Reformation, which people think, if I do external religious practices, that's all I have to do. God will take care of me. That's just not the Christian religion. It never has been, because Christ said, if they persecute you in one town, flee to another. And if that's true during persecution, it's true during earthquakes, hurricanes. You can't, you know, if a tidal wave is coming, you can't say, I'm going to say the rosary. If you can get out, you get out. Of course, if you can't get out and the tidal wave is going to hit you in 5 seconds, then you pray, okay? Because there's nothing else you can do. But if there's time to flee, flee.
This one from Nearly Mad Joe. This is a good article. He also mischaracterizes the Benedict option, and his alternative is an excellent addition to that option. The problem I have with the Crusader approach is that it neglects the Catholic man in his immediate circumstances. By putting the goal and end before the beginning, we first have to find a way so Catholic men can connect and be together to help and strengthen each other. Without that, you cannot come together. We need a vision for creating communities for the faithful, not a physical, but supportive communities based on our common faith and worldview. Without that, you'll never be able to have crusaders. We live in a virtual world, and are called to be saints in a physical world. We need to be together physically, to pray together, to feel each other's welcoming handshake. Other men helping the younger men to create Christ-centered families. Stable men to assist those with issues. Men kneeling together before God, giving their lives to show and spread the love of the gospel. And very importantly, to be there for each other so more of us can fulfill our purpose in life. That is to bring glory to God and lead as many souls as possible to the throne of Christ. This is a difficult age to live in, and we shouldn't get the end before the beginning. We need each other, and we need each other now. Thank you for this podcast. It is a conversation that needs to be had.
Okay, so his argument is a sound one, but he employs it badly. He's basically saying that there's a much bigger spiritually or sociological or anthropologic problem in the church right now, and that's a lack of men having a real physical community with other families and other men, which is perhaps a failure of parish life in the West. Okay, that's not true of parish life in other parts of the world. But the fact that that problem exists doesn't deny the fact that cities are being burnt down and some people's lives are being threatened. And you can't say because we have that general problem, we first must solve the problem everywhere in the world, and then we should talk about saving a few people's lives who are threatened and they want to get out now. I mean, it's completely, evidently he must live in a town that's not being threatened, or he doesn't feel threatened by what's going on, or maybe he doesn't even live in the United States. So I can understand that. But if you found a Catholic city in a town in the countryside, then you get everything what he just asked for. So somehow he's saying we shouldn't solve this. We shouldn't propose a specific solution for a few people. We should work for solving the problem for everyone, even though the specific solution for few people solves the problem for those people. So that's like saying we shouldn't solve the problem for men in the church. We shouldn't solve the problem for men in any parish until we solve the problem in the whole church. Well, that's just irrational to say that, isn't it? But that's what he's saying. So because if Catholics gather together in the countryside and build a community, that's like a parish. Don't they have equal right to solve the problem? Of course they do. So if we should solve the problem in the whole church, we should solve it in every part of the church. And therefore, this Crusader option is merely doing that. It's solving the problem in a particular way. It's saying if you want the problem solved and you don't have the problem solved where you are, then flee and let's form communities in the countryside. So his objection is really, what he says is very sound, but he employs it to attack the very solution he advocates to be solved. as almost as if it's illegal for a few people to solve the problem until everyone solves the problem. That's just so that kind of mentality is so stained with socialism. It's unbelievable.
Mhm. From Lazizar Rabbit. I don't think we can flee. We have to live in the world, but not of it. I think if Catholics collectivize, we will be crushed. We have to embed ourselves like sleeper cells.
Well, you know, you can try it and see what happens. Most Catholics, when they are isolated, submit and surrender. If you look at the history of humanity, the Catholic societies that tried to let the wave of the problem flow over them and survive it were wiped out. All the Catholic churches and parishes of North Africa were wiped out by the Islamic invasion. They didn't organize a military to defend themselves. They were divided among themselves. They were all wiped out. Only in Western Europe did Christianity survive, or in the Byzantine Empire, because they raised arms, they built city walls, and they fought battles to defend themselves. They didn't defend themselves by saying the rosary. They didn't defend themselves by getting along in the world or living isolated or letting the wave go over them. That's not how they defend themselves, okay? This is not, when barbarians are entering the gate and law order is breaking down, when the Marxist revolution is breaking out, it's not the same situation as being at the beach. You know, if you go to the beach and there's a high surf, if you've ever been on one, and as a youth, I grew up in the water, so I love the beach. When the big wave comes, the only way to survive it is to turn sideways and let it pass over you, okay? If you confront it face on, it will smack you down. But we're not talking about waves now here. We're talking about life and liberty, armed gangs and mobs. The only way is either concentrated military force at the moment of the threat, and the police and National Guard and military are not giving that to many people in the US. So the only other solution is flight, okay? So the comment comes from someone who has no idea how to respond to physical threat.
This one's by Nick Inglegary. I think I was able to read between your lines. Us Catholics, are fighting a difficult. As you said, we have to turn the other cheek attitude. For us to survive, we must change. We need to be more proactive than the left. It looks like they have so much more power than us. They have the press, Hollywood, and much more. We must learn from them. It would be a good idea to buy Solinsky's book and learn how to fight back. The left thinks that they can roll over us, but we have weapons of our own. Prayer and the rosary are our main ones. We need more weapons to make the left falter. It will take someone much more smarter than I to figure that out. What we need most is a leader to show us the way. We should stop talking and start doing. We can form an army of Catholic warriors once we find a general. I think there are many. I follow several on YouTube. Blah, blah, blah. You could be one. Blah, blah, blah. We Catholics are willing to fight if we have good leadership. Keep up your good work.
Okay, so he makes a good point. We do need leaders. And I would add, we need a Christian party. And here at Ordo Militaris Radio, we already did a program on how America needs a Christian party and what is true Christian leadership and true Christian activism. Those are general problems. But we have to remember, and this seems to be a current a thread of misunderstanding among the comments on Anthony Stein's podcast there, is that solving the solution for some people is not a sin, okay? It doesn't mean also not solving the solution for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But not everyone wants to solve the problem. So why is it wrong for the people who want to solve the problem for themselves to solve it? Okay, so this is socialism again. The socialists cannot suffer that a few people are going to solve the problem and therefore make the God state not unnecessary, because the socialists want the state to be divine, supreme, sovereign, and Leviathan. That means having authority over everyone. They can't suffer that some Catholics would actually organize something, make themselves independent, and solve all the problems, because then you don't need socialism anymore. So I think this is the underground ideologic problem here. So, you know, if Catholics want to solve this problem and feel that they need to because they're living in particular parts of the country that are highly threatened, and they're just sick and tired of what's going on in the West and want to solve the problem radically, completely, and forever, the Crusader option is the way to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Before we go through the other comments, other 3 pages, what are the politics behind this?
Okay, so there are no politics behind this. It's just common sense. I'm a cultural anthropologist. I've studied the way peoples have lived and worked and together for thousands of years all around the globe. And everywhere, under threat, people gather together of like mind, like culture, like religion, and build fortified settlements where they can undertake all kinds of economic, religious, or social or community activities in a safe place, where they can raise their families, retire, open businesses, work, produce goods, create economic activity, build up, conserve, and protect wealth. This is just common sense. You don't have to be anything more than a human being to see it, because humans have always recognized this. So being a Catholic, why can't we do what humans have always done? Is it somehow illegal for us? If you have a political ideology, you will say Catholics should not do this. This should not be done. And you're probably espousing a politics like socialism or some kind of corporatism, where no, our political group must control all of society, and therefore it's a no-no that you solve the problems. We must solve the problems, and we're here to help you. And you know what that means. We're here to help you. Okay, so it's absolutely absurd. And so there's no politics. It's just common sense. Now, some people have lost all common sense, and some people's politics has become their religion. They can't see reality anymore. They couldn't see a church burning right in front of their face. To them, it's just a way of expressing their dissatisfaction of social inequality, and we should respect them for that and ask them over to the local bar before they burn it down and share a beer with them. You know, their politics have made them mad, has made them psychotic and incapable of seeing the reality in front of their own eyes. So the Crusader option is based on no politics. It's based on common sense and Catholic faith, and that's why it's so good, because it'll be free of all ideologic control.
From Bruce Dell from 4 days ago. These are all positive objectives and based on society restored to Christ. We are presently going through the passion of the church, but on the other side, we look forward to the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, where all men faithful to their Queen will indeed be warriors. As we go through the darkness, even if physically disabled, we are called men and women alike to sanctity. We must go through the Calvary, but the ever peace will come more quickly, with more consecrated souls.
Well, what he says is spiritually true, but that spirituality, which is Catholic spirituality as he expresses it, doesn't mean what I think he's trying to make it seem to mean, namely that we should lay down and let ourselves be crucified, our houses burnt down, and our family members murdered during a Marxist revolution. That's not what our spirituality means, okay? So if you want to know how great the risk is, just read what happened during the Russian Revolution, or watch a movie made in Russia called The Admiral, about how the entire Russian Empire was overtaken by the Marxists because of this kind of an attitude that with our faith, that's all we need. We'll resist. Instead of organizing a united armed effort to oppose the revolution or fleeing. The only Russians who survived the Russian Revolution are those who fled Russia, because the whole nation fell to Marxist revolution and no one was willing to do anything about it and organize it. And there was no leader. Once the Tsar was eliminated, they had no Christian leaders because they didn't have a Christian political party. None of their political parties were Christian. So it's what he says is good spirituality, but bad politics.
From Montese Magin Martinez. Something like this could be very successful, especially if managed well. Best beginning would be to start a health and fitness club in your local parish. Okay, pass.
Okay, yeah, you could start a fitness club in your local parish, but you know, once again, we can't lose sight of the whole picture and the real threat. Founding a physical fitness club in your parish doesn't address the whole picture or the actual threat. So if Catholics found communities in the countryside, should they follow fitness clubs? Well, I personally, as a friar, don't recommend gyms or fitness clubs because they're condemned in the Bible as occasions of sin. And but obviously in your own home, you can have a gym, you know, because then it's not an occasion of sin anymore. You're there privately. But that's not how to solve the current threat. Okay, it's you know, okay, he wants fitness clubs, but maybe that's easier, you know. And if you're a businessman, go ahead and find the fitness club. But if they're burning all the businesses down in your town, maybe it's not time to start a business club in your town. I would just say.
Oh, another crazy one. Michael Heffernan. Solution: 3 days of darkness.
Okay, a lot of Catholics believe in the thing called 3 days of darkness. I've looked at all the references I can find. I've never found any substantial basis for it. But whether there will be or not be in the future some apocalyptic event that will cause people to fear God and repent, that doesn't, what are Catholics going to do now whose cities are being burned? They're going to wait for that in some distant unknown future, or are they going to do what our Lord said? If they persecute in one town, flee to another. I think they should listen to God and not to, you know, somewhat uncertain opinions about something uncertainly promised future possible apocalyptic event.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to get our priorities straight on reality here.
And the quote by St. Louis IX is becoming wonderful. I won't say it. Deals with a sword.
Yeah, St. Louis IX was big on using the sword immediately upon its necessity. And since Catholic society isn't that way anymore, it's all the more reason that some Catholics have to flee because they're in high-risk zones. And they have a right to flee. And they have a right to live in peace in some place where they won't be threatened again.
Well, here's AB. Not me, but someone else. He has the same initials. In the time of decay of the Roman Empire, you could run away. That's why the original Benedict option worked. It won't work today because we can't run away. The technology is totally different.
Well, I guess if if every city in the world was burning down and there was Marxist revolution going on in every country, and you couldn't even go to places like Greenland, Antarctica, then I would agree you could not flee. But in the modern world, the ability to flee is all the easier. Get in your car and drive away, okay? And if you have an American passport, you can travel to most countries in the world. So we can flee, and technology makes it easier. That doesn't, his argument is just, it doesn't make sense. I don't know what he's referring to.
Yeah. I mean, if you're afraid your government's going to track you, well, get rid of your stuff.
Yeah, if you're afraid of the government tracking, get rid of your cell phone, okay?
This one from Jessica. I know several Catholics in their 20s and 30s who have for years been talking about wanting to live in a commune, mostly meaning a smaller community that is self-sufficient and not reliant on the world at large to function, where they can live their faith. I've been wanting to move to the country to farm, but need a community to make it sustainable. Could we organize something like this in America with like-minded individuals? I commented, yes, directly.
Okay, however, listen to the words she's using. Catholics wanted to live in a commune, Okay, living in a commune is contrary to the Catholic faith because the Catholic faith holds that everyone has the right to private property and no one has the obligation to share their private property with anyone else. Have Catholics given of their private property to the poor and needy in times past? Of course they do, and that's called an act of charity. But a commune is a communist concept that denies the right to own property and denies the lawfulness of the right to own property. And actually, Pope John the 21st condemned as a heresy the assertion that it is more immoral to own private property, okay, or that people who do, okay. So the other word she uses is sustainability, which is another Marxist concept of you can't harm the environment and you can't get too wealthy because you have to constantly dole your wealth out to us who don't want to do any work and want to get help in doing it. So I totally reject that concept of society. It's yes in a general sense, but if you listen to what the terms she's using, maybe she doesn't know why or how she's using them. It reflects a mindset I would completely reject and I would say would destroy the whole concept of the Crusader option, which has more to do with independent economic republics of Italy and the heroism of the Crusaders than has anything to do with communists or communes, okay? The Crusader option has to guarantee private property and private initiative and economic liberty, okay, and religious and Catholic, the freedom to practice the Catholic faith. If it involved in any kind of Marxist socialism, leftism, communism, collectivism, sustainability, it will be destroyed. And people who have that mentality should not be allowed to live in these communities or they will destroy it because their whole mind is so twisted by error that they're a danger to themselves and the community they live in. They're not Catholic, they just don't realize it. They've been indoctrinated by Marxism.
KMF. Back in the early 90s, there was a group or movement or organization. I don't know exactly how to characterize it. It was called Calumet et Terra, or translated Heaven and Earth. I probably spelled it wrong. And it was similar to what you're talking about with groups of Catholics getting together to live off the land, combine their skills and talents. I don't know what has happened to them since then. It was something I was only loosely a part of, but I really liked this idea that we need to get together as Catholics and build communities that support us. A lot of preppers are actually doing this. They're getting together with like-minded people and have various different skills to complement one another in finding property that they can build a community on when our society eventually collapses. I think that we need to take that idea as Catholics and build communities all over the United States, even the world. Isn't that the sort of what Catholics did in the early centuries? I think we need to go back to some of those ideas. We all need each other. There's no way that we can do this isolated, alone, in family groups, or just as individuals.
Okay, this is a very good comment by someone who understands what's going on in society. I would only point out that the prepper movement is an individualist movement and it is a secularist movement. Preppers have no particular religious beliefs. Many of them are of a certain Protestant mentality that fixates on the apocalyptic. But they're individualists in the sense of they want to be completely self-supporting and have no community relationships whatsoever. So I would imagine if you try to get preppers together and form a community, it would break down in the first 6 months because they don't have the Catholic faith to unite them. They don't have any sense of community. So the preppers are like the opposite era of the socialists or communists, the previous comment you made. But what otherwise he says is very true. One small error in what he says is the Crusader option is not about living off the land. Okay, the phrase in English, living off the land, means dedicating primarily to agricultural interests. A Crusader option should not limit the Catholics who partake in it to agriculture. They should be allowed to be involved in any sort of business, manufacturing, or economic activity whatsoever, whether it's banking, running stores, bakeries, supermarkets, cloth production, whatever things they want to make, eyeglasses, whatever is their talent, medical offices, you know. So yes, obviously in the countryside, a portion of the economy will be living off the land in the sense of running agricultural businesses to guarantee the food supply for the town. But that won't be the totality and should not be the totality of the economic activity. It would ultimately not be a stable thing if that were the case.
This one from Teresa Baker Carl. A slow news week at last. No, it wasn't. Sorry. Watch yesterday's program. Oof. That sounds so nice. I'm afraid it may not last long, but we must take advantage when we can. Not having the strength to do much anymore, I have had to find different ways to be active as a Catholic. So I've settled on witnessing to those around me. I have two caregivers, one of whom is a fallen Catholic, who carries a rosary but does not appear to pray it. Still, one never knows. The other one is a 21-year-old who has been living with a Muslim man who just ended their relationship. Her life is quite unstable, so I share with her as much as I can. Of course, there are my grandchildren who are actively seeking the church, and my daughter who has non-stop questions.
Okay, so I can understand someone who's elderly at the end of their life without any vigor and physical ability, that they don't have much of a positive outlook on life. And I applaud the woman for witnessing to her faith in the last years and being that kind of an apostle. But the Crusader option is for the young, the vigorous, the optimistic, the people who want to be bold, take an initiative, and solve all the problem and create a stable future for themselves and their family. So to say that it won't continue is just a sentimental comment that's based on despair. And I would rebuke that. Despair is one of the worst sins. And to spread despair is even worse than committing the sin of despair yourself. And there's a lot of that on social media. And I don't blame this woman for it. I can understand her situation. But the left promotes despair on social media because they don't want you to take the initiatives that will save yourself and your family.
Oh, yeah. Kevin Waski. Love the idea, but I don't think it's feasible for a lot of reasons. Chief among them, we are a minority. Among that minority who is willing to go to the lengths to accomplish this goal of forming these communities and programs. It seems like a great idea in American society that have lost almost all sense of community. But I look around at my Catholic friends, traditional and serious-minded guys. They're already settled. I don't know if there's enough motivating power unless something was already in place. It's asking a lot for them to move somewhere, basically create a community, create goods, services, manufacture some kind of baking system outside the Fed, etc. I don't know anyone what has the resources, know-how to do that as great of an idea that it is.
Okay, first, it's called the Crusader option, not the Crusader dictate. So this proposal has nothing to do with telling people what to do, okay? And there are 60 million Catholics in the United States, so I wouldn't say we're a minority. But there will always be some people who are under a more serious threat, are more financially capable, are more red-pilled, understand what's going on, and understand the kind of decisive action that needs to be taken. And after all, what our order is proposing is an option, is a way of putting in practice the Crusader option. And at the end of this program, we'll talk about it more in particular, for 100 individuals. So to say that 100 individuals can't achieve it is just, you know, there's 60 million of us out there. So I'm sure there's probably tens of thousands of Catholics who would want to do this if they knew about the thing. So I don't really see where he's coming from. If he's from a social class that couldn't take the initiative because they're financially not capable, or he's from an area of the country that's not under imminent threat, I can understand perfectly his point of view, but that's not the whole country and that's not everyone.
This last one's a long one.
May just summarize it instead of read all of it.
Okay. Got from Van Ilma. Okay. I have several problems with these types of opinions. Now, first, I don't disagree that Catholics shouldn't be passive, but it surprises me that one can only see the two options where either you are passive, not doing anything, or warrior, going as forward as suggesting some level of militarization of the church. I think this is nonsense and is carried with millennial, millennial, the world,
Millenarianism.
yell. I believe traditionalists end up attributing way more power to the world's elite today than what they actually have, and up suggesting even more absurd and impractical suggestions that only cripple the church further. Consider the fact that the church nearly ignored communist infiltration in its own breast, but was extremely quickly to politicize itself a public show of anti-communist zeal under Pope John Paul II, which further demoralized the church in countries with proximity to the Eastern Bloc and made the life for Catholics there more difficult.
Okay, stop a moment here. He just said that John Paul II's anti-communist statement hurt the church in communist countries. Okay, so I don't know where this guy is coming from, but his sense of morality, evidently for him, ideology is the litmus test of Catholicism, and it's not morality. Okay, so so what he says about militarizing the church. First of all, he doesn't feel that the Marxist attempted revolution in the United States, which is currently underground, is a threat. It's probably because he's a Marxist or a leftist, and he welcomes it. He seems to bash John Paul II for opposing communism like that. Makes me seem he must be an extreme Marxist himself. He thinks that mixing Marxism and Christianity is good for the church. That's complete heresy. This guy's not Catholic, excuse me for saying public. I do not believe he's a Catholic. I believe he's an ideologue. But as we said, the Crusader option is not for everyone, and it's an option, not a dictate. And it's not a solution for everyone. It's a solution for those who see it as a solution for themselves. And it's not militarizing the church. Even the wealthy live in secure communities that are patrolled by security. So if the wealthy globalists have it, why can't we have it? Is it wrong for us, but right for them? Are we not allowed to own guns, but they are allowed to own guns? There's just so much leftism in his thought that it almost makes you nauseous to listen to it. Please don't read the rest of it, but it's just absurd. So you can see who's opposed to the Crusader option. We've just reviewed objections, and Anthony Stein, his commentators seem to be all from the left. I think only one or two seem to be sound Catholics, but even the way they employ their arguments promotes leftism and socialism. And that's a serious issue. And that's why his show got 9,000 views and we got one prospective investor from all his listeners. So it was a good show what he did, but his audience isn't interested in it because they incline to left politics, which is the cause of the problem, and they don't want to admit it does exist. They want to pacify Catholics to it so they get overwhelmed by it, I think. That may not be their intention, or they're just so controlled by leftist ideology that has seeped into the culture and their families they belong to that they can't see the problem. And that's sad, but you know, thank be to God, my family is never members of the left, and it has not seeped into our family, and we don't want it ever to.
Yeah. Now the Crusader option.
Okay, so now let's talk in detail about the Crusader option, and this is for potential investors. So obviously, this would be great if this was an option for everyone, but it can't be an option for everyone at the beginning because it requires capital to undertake, okay? Just as in medieval society, Catholic cities were protected by the wealthy organizing and building walls and defending and raising armies and taking initiative, so today, Catholics who are better off financially need to be the first ones to take the initiative because it's not possible without them. You can have all the technical know-how in the world, but if you don't have the financing, you can't get it done. And we cannot rely on financing to get this done. We have to do it all from people who already have wealth and don't need loans and aren't in debt, okay? Because we need to do this with our own money so that we're not tied down to the financial networks, okay? and that we're not dependent on anyone, okay? So having already done extensive real estate research in the United States in the last 5 years for my relatives, I've talked to hundreds of real estate agents. I've looked at thousands of properties. So I'm not trained in real estate, but my personal experience probably is equivalent to real estate agents. But I've looked over the whole nation, so I've seen different problems in different parts of the country. So from what I know, I said, and this is what I propose as President Order Militaris for this venture, because this is a venture now, it's an investment venture. Understand that a venture is adventurous. There's some risk in it, but it means that you're proposing a course of economic activity for a group of people who associate together in some kind of legal entity, whether it's a partnership or a corporation, stock corporation, who are going to undertake an economic activity together in a way that will lead to profitability. Okay, so it's a venture. And you're going to need $100,000 investment for each individual participating. So if you are a single person, you want to participate, you need that much in cash, okay? And if you're a family of 5, you need 500,000, okay, in cash. You have to be liquid, okay? So because current costs of construction of housing is at 200 a square foot, okay? That's the retail. The wholesale is around 100 a square foot. And if we do this as a venture, the initial investors will get the wholesale price. I can't tell you it will exactly be 100, it could be 120, because I can't make any certain statements about a future that's yet undetermined. But as a gross rule of thumb, we're looking for 100 investors who can invest 100,000 each as a minimum. Why? To raise 10 million. Why 10 million? Because to make this thing work, you want to be in the countryside. You want to be on land that is agriculturally productive. You want to be in a place where the laws allow you to freely own guns without any restriction. And you want to be in a state without zoning controls, pretty much without health board controls, where you can do what you want in the countryside. So I won't say what state I'm looking in publicly. If you're an investor, you can call our offices at 1-406-299-9260 and speak to me personally, or leave a message and I'll get right back to you and speak to you personally. I personally think you need 2,000 acres of land, and there are places in the country for 3 million you could buy 40 square miles of land. I would like to say to investors, let's buy the 40 square miles so that we have a vast estate that belongs to the corporation we can economically develop in future decades for everyone who might ever come to the town and live. Agriculturally productive land where there's a supply of water, and because those are the basic needs of life. But 10 million because you have to build a nucleus settlement. You have to build like a tightly compact urban settlement in the form of like, as what we would call in America condos, but where actually everyone owned their own property, that is concentrated in such ways that can be easily defended with high, with security fencing, triple deep, and security guard towers, so that at the beginning it's a secure place, but a place that's not just residences, but also has shops that can be rented by individuals, that has churches and chapels, that has the administrative buildings for the community, that has public works, because you have to survive a water supply, so you have to have a sewage system, you have to have an electric system that is hooked to the national grid, but also is capable of acting independently. So we're going to need a windmill for power generation, we're going to need a solar power field, we need backup generators that can run on gasoline or kerosene. We want storage facilities for the community. We want supermarkets and food shops in the place. We want everything that could be self-sufficient so that, God forbid, if that community had to be cut off from society or was cut off by inimical forces, it could survive months on end, okay, without any problem. And with a security team, which would be provided by recruits in our order to guard it 24/7. With its own bank, in the United States, we can start our own private currency and begin a complete independent economic system. And that's what we need to do. With its own water reserves, so that we could have like 3 months of water already stored away in case pumps fail or electricity fails, okay? And this is just common sense. Buildings built in such a way as they're not flammable, so the place cannot be a victim of arson, okay? Because you have to assume that evil people might come in the future, and you want to build for things that last. If you look over AJ's left shoulder, you see an image of the Crusader Castle of the Karak de Chevaliers, which is just north of Lebanon in the territory of modern-day Syria. And that was built by the Crusaders. You see that bridge entering it. That bridge is a two-way street. So you can see how vast that fortress is, and it survives to this day nearly intact because the Crusaders built to last, because their intent was to protect people forever. And the same idea is what our order inspires the order. If we were to do a project like this, we would build it to last forever, because there's no point. One of the problems with modern society is you invest tons of money in your house, you take out a mortgage, and after you paid it down, your house off 30 years later when you're entering retirement, the house is falling down, you don't even have money to fix it up anymore because you've been defrauded, okay? And that has to kind of end. So we have to build a Catholic society not based on usury, based on Catholic principles, quality materials, things that will last. But we're going to need wealthy people at the beginning, or well-off people at the beginning, to be the seed shares, the initial investors, because as a minimum, 100,000 person, but they should also have more capital. So once they're residing there, then they can open up businesses, factories, manufacturing, stores, and create jobs. And so the city can expand, and we can build housing for people who don't have that money and are willing to be renters, okay? Or to take a mortgage from those Catholics who start their own financial services and build a Catholic town like that, where everything is controlled by Catholic principles and by Catholics, and we're independent of the globalist system. We refuse the COVID-19 and all the masks and all that vaccinations and all that mania, and we refuse the entire leftist political agenda, and we make our town a center of a Catholic party that will spread across the country, because America needs to be saved. And of every other kind of Catholic institution, our own private Catholic schools, everything independent, self-sufficient. And that's the kind of Catholics we seek. And without Catholics like that, it's not going to survive, okay? And I think our order, imbued with the spirit of the Crusades and intent on defense and security, is capable of organizing it and seeing that it gets done. Although the actual corporation that does it will be a separate corporation from our company, okay? It will be a joint venture corporation, and will provide technical know-how, consulting and management. So this is what the kind of investor looking for, and every investor who has the financial means will have to undergo a background check. We don't want people with criminal records. We don't want people with serious moral problems, okay? No pedophiles, no sex offenders. And why? We're not purists. We don't want to build a heaven on earth. But at the beginning of any solid, stable, economic, social, anthropologic, urban foundation, the founders have to be sound, because they morally are the foundation of that society. You can't take someone in there and he has kids who are drug addicts, because you'll have drug trade from the beginning and will destroy the whole society from the beginning. The beginning has to be clean, sound, and pure, solid, and secure. Problems will always arise in the future, but in the beginning, we don't need problems, okay? And we can't offer a problem solution to others. So I and AJ have no criminal record. We're squeaky clean, and we would only take people like that. People who are not in debt, okay? So if you're in debt, pay off your debts. If you're in, you'll have to pass a background check and a credit check, okay? And if you don't, you won't be accepted as an investor in this venture, because you would be at risk to all the other investors, their families, and their children, okay? And that's not prejudice, that's common sense. That's common Catholic sense. And since our order is the one that would start the venture, we're going to lay down the rules, and that will be the way it is. And only Catholics, okay? It's not going to be for Protestants. It's not going to be for Greek Orthodox. It's not going to be for Buddhists, Hindus, secularists, atheists, non-believers, and not practicing Catholics. Why? Because, as I said, it has to begin on a good foundation. It has to be people who are united in the faith and truly believe. That has to be the core foundation. Those have to be the as it were, noble people who found this Catholic settlement. Otherwise, it's not going to work, and there won't be cooperation, there'd be dissension. None of the people can be socialists, Marxists, fascists, corporatists, sustainabilitists, or globalists, or anything of that kind. And if your family can't have any of that in there too. So, and we will examine the backgrounds of every applicant and its family members. You have to pass. If you don't all pass, you know, we will examine your financial donations. If you've been a big donor to a Marxist party, we will not allow you in, even if now you're a supporter of the Republicans, because you're a security risk. Why did you give so much money to the left just 3 years ago? You're a security risk. I'm sorry to say it, but it has to be that way. It has to be. That's the only way it would ever survive, because the enemies of Christ will attempt to destroy it, okay? And so it has to be high security. And we are a high security company. That's why the liberals hate us and they don't invest in us. We only take investments from those kind of people because it would be a risk to all our other investors to do otherwise. And since our investments are offered privately, we're not obliged to sell it to everyone. So same thing with this venture. It's a venture, and so we're not obliged to offer it to everyone. I'm sorry if you think otherwise. And that's the way it will be organized. So this is for serious people. This is for clear-minded people. This is for people who have some liquid assets. This is for people who want to live in peace and security for the rest of their lives. This is for people who understand what's going on in the world. This is for people who understand the imminent threat the United States is under. And this is for people who really want to get it done and not just talk about it, tweet about it, or, you know, emote about it. Okay, so it's for a select few. And as I said, we have one potential investor. And if you want to make this a reality and you're interested, you call me personally at 1-406-299-9260. That's 1-406-299-9260. And you can call that number via Skype from any country in the world that allows Skype, because that is a Skype number and the call is free on Skype. You don't even have to sign up to Skype. You just download the app and you can call that number for free. And you can talk as many hours as you want for free with me. And I can talk to you more about it in detail. But it's for the serious investor. And what I'm doing now is I'm not asking for your money. You call me, I'll ask you your name, how much you think you can invest. You ask me your questions, I explain a few things. I'm gonna put your name down on a subscriber list, okay? First contact me, this is the first to call is the first to gain. So if I have 500 people call me, it's the first 100 I'm looking at, okay? So this is a first come, first serve kind of thing, although 500 would be good. But once I have a sufficient number that looks viable, then the next phase is it will be to found the development corporation and sell options. So option to be membership will be like $100, and you have to pay that, and that will verify who you are. And then you will have the third phase would be background check. You'll pay for the fee of the background check. You'll authorize me to undertake it. I will have a security company do a background check on you, and I alone and the officers of the company will see the results of that background check, and it will be locked away and no one else will see it, no other investor will see it. But you'll have to pass my immaculate standards. And if you do, then I put you down as you're on the list, okay? Then I will ask you to make the investment of $100,000, okay? That will qualify you as a member of the venture, okay? And that money will be put in escrow, and I will not touch a penny of it. The corporation will not touch a penny of it until we develop a detailed business plan for the founding of the town. Then all those who've made the payment of 100,000 shall vote, each one vote for every 100,000 they've invested. And they will approve or decline the plan, or they will ask to be improved. And once it's approved, okay, by a majority, we'll decide whether it'll be 50%, I think it should be 66%, then we'll go ahead with the venture, okay? So it's a democratic, it's a capitalistic, it's a Catholic project. It's highly secure and it's highly secured. And with investors like that, this will go forward. and we won't have, we'll have a legal team, we'll have an architectural team, we'll have a construction team, and then once we actually begin the project, then we'll put out calls for Catholic carpenters, plumbers, masons to work on the project and get it done. Because most likely we'll be in a part of the country which has few of these workers, and so we'll have to call in Catholic workers from around the country to build it. So it can be done, it's not difficult. Projects like this are regularly done anywhere to build supermarkets, shopping malls, condominium complexes. We're not doing something that's never been done. We're just doing something that's never been done by Catholics for Catholics, and that will make this unique. And I think this, if you have that kind of liquidity, this is a unique real estate investment, because once the city exists and has all these characteristics, your investment will be worth a lot more. Once we actually have the living units built, the apartments and condos, your $100,000 will go against the cost of buying it. So if the unit costs $350,000 and you've invested $200,000, you only have to convert that 200,000, those 200,000 you've already paid in, you only have to pay the extra 153,000. Okay, so that's how it works. Your 100,000 won't go up in smoke. Okay, it's not a membership fee. It is a future investment on the capital costs. So I think it's an excellent venture. I think it's an excellent investment. And this is for Catholics. It's something that will appeal only to practicing devout Catholics who feel themselves seriously threatened and are looking for a serious solution. It's not for everyone. I know there's a lot of people out there can't afford this. Don't feel like, you know, this is, you know, we're somehow offending you or depriving you of a solution because you can't afford this. But as I said, the beginning has to be done by people who have the wealth to make it succeed and who will be able to have the wealth to get it to grow in the future, okay? And because eventually, as it gets big enough and wealthy enough, the town should build a real medieval wall around itself so that forever it is defended with fortified gateways, because that's the kind of chaos we're looking at in society now. That's not possible in the beginning, because to build a medieval wall would cost like $100 million today, unless we can get a voluntary system of inhabitants to be workers on it. And that's just the reality of it. But that's my vision for it. That would be what our corporation, how we would help you along. And we would design it with security experts so it would be a safe hub. It was for, this is for Catholics who are going to want to live in a European style, with houses that abut one another in a compact unity. It's not for Catholics who want to live with everyone on 2 acres and have a big yard around, okay, of their house. It's not that kind of living venture, because that is not secure. There'd be no way to secure homes like that, okay? The central original foundation of this town has to be highly compact and fortified like a fortress. That's what it has to be. And it has to be easily defendable, okay? And I will add that the Catholics who are initial investors have to be willing, have to be not opposed to gun rights. They have to be willing to own a gun and learn how to defend themselves, and because that's necessary. Or if they're not able to defend themselves because they're elderly or they're women folk, they have to be willing that at least the town is able to defend itself. So if you're against gun rights and things like that, this is not an option for you. You don't have the political outlook that we're looking for, the kind of investor we're looking for. So that is what the Crusader option is, in a form that I, as president of Order Militaris Inc., a Montana stock corporation, which currently has no authorization to sell 10 million stock and can have from the state authorization to sell any amount of stock, even billions, is suggesting. This is not a make-believe Twitter reality from a fake account. This is a real Montana corporation. I am its president. You can look me up in the Montana Secretary of State's business directory for corporations. Just type Ordo Militaris. You will find our company. You will see we're in good standing. You will see that I am the president, listed there with the Secretary of State, who have authorization to speak for the company and take action for the company. And I will be taking advice from my 2 older brothers who are experts in finance, one in tax accounting and one in cost analysis, as the project goes on. So I will not take a salary on this. I'm doing this for the love of Christ. So that's what the venture is.
How would you like to close?
Think about the future. Don't ignore reality. Look where we're at now, because we presume the left was not as evil as they turned out to be. Okay? They are far more evil. Just read what they did to Russia, China, Cambodia, Cuba, to name countless countries that were destroyed, tens of millions of people murdered. The left are malign. They're godless, and because they have no God, they have no morality, they will not stop at anything. We must defend ourselves. We must take decisive action. Corporate America has turned against us and wants us dead. And to pretend like all these commentators on that forum have that the problem isn't as serious as it is just unrealistic. Okay, this is if you've been red pilled enough to, and your mind is free from globalist control and from mainstream media control, if you realize they're all lying to you and they're out for you, then this is something for you. So I think this is a sane approach. I think it's prudent. I think it is the way ahead, and I think it is a hopeful approach. It will give hope to many Catholics, but I also think it's a very good financial investment. Of course, as president of Ordo Militaris, I might be slightly prejudiced in my viewpoint.
This is Ordo Militaris Radio TV, signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.